So great to see so many of you guys here. Welcome to Black Sun's first event of the year. Super excited to be here and to be off to a running start. Second week of January. It's really exciting. I really appreciate everyone's involvement, particularly at such short notice. I have to say, we've been hugely overwhelmed by the interest for this event. So we'll do our best to run it to be as interactive as possible so that you guys can get the most out of it. And I guess just in terms of by way of background, for those of you that don't know me, my name's Sally Pilot. I look after the advisory team at Black Sun. I've been in this business for far too many years, and I think actually what's really exciting is never before have I seen such a pace of change, momentum, and urgency in moving things forward with both the regulators, standard setters, corporates, and investors. And I think it's a hugely exciting time. And I think what's really exciting about it is the consolidation that's happening in the marketplace, the general collaboration that's taking place, and coordination around what I really see as a common vision. And I think that's a really exciting place to be in after so many years of such challenge. So I hope there's going to be clarity moving forward. Just so you know, we're going to run this session a little bit differently than we have done before. The first half hour we're running as a webinar. So as you know from the note that I sent out, we're going to have two keynote speakers today to set out the session. And then what we're going to do, hopefully all of you are well adversed at all these sorts of things. We're going to put two links into the chat box when the time comes. And then we're going to ask you to go to one of those two links. Those links will take you to a discussion. So we're going to run two different discussions today because of the number of people that we have attending the session. We didn't quite anticipate that we'd have so many, but that's great. But I think if we run two sessions, everybody will get an opportunity to really share their experiences, hear from others, and more importantly, ask questions of each other. So as I said, the first half hour will run as a straight webinar. I'm delighted to have Michael and Charlotte here from CDSB to set the scene for us. As somebody said to me yesterday, CDSB is really TCFD before there was the TCFD. So Michael's been in this game for a long time. He's going to give us an overview of the journey that they've been on as an organization, expectations for this year, and more importantly, what's going to happen moving forward with CDSB and all of the other standard setters, which I know is very top of mind for everyone. And then I'm really delighted to introduce James Whittington, who joined the Black Sun advisory team only, I think, 8 days ago. And I know he's delighted to be with us, and particularly delighted when on day 2, I said to him, we're going to run an event. And he said, great, when? And I said, next week. And he said, whoa, okay. So we're off to a great start. So that's going to be we'll do about 10 minutes each. We'll take some Q&As. If there are any questions, please use the chat box. We're going to have to rely on it a little bit more. So you know who's around the room. I know you can only see the names of each other. When we'll go into the discussion groups, we'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves and your organization and where you're at on the TCFD journey. But for now, just to let you know, we have a real mix of companies today, mostly listed 350s. We have a mix of sectors, we have a mix of year ends, and we also have a mix of roles that you each play in this process. So I think the discussion will be very rich. I'll ask somebody to put the companies that are attending into the chat box, but we have the likes of Burberry, Babcock, DS Smith, Kingfisher, Direct Line Group, Tesco, Schroders, NatWest, and many more. So it will be a really exciting conversation. So I hope you use it to really share your experiences, learn from others, and hopefully go away with some real practical advice moving forward. As I always say, I sort of see these as our counseling sessions. You're not alone here, so let's use others and get some advice from others. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Michael from CDSB to give us a bit of an overview and set the context for the discussion. So Michael, take it away, will you?
Thank you very much, Sally, and thank you very much for having me. Really happy to be talking with you today. I did bring some slides, if that's all right, so I'll share them and promise not to bore you too much with them. Share screen, there we go. Actually, I'm not able to share the slides. Could somebody enable that? I'll give a bit of a hello in the meantime. So thank you for having me. My name is Michael Zimmerny. I'm the Policy and External Affairs Director at CDSB, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board. Thank you very much. I got the sharing rights now. So hopefully you'll be able to see my screen in a second. And what I wanted to do today is, with looming sort of deadlines, in front of you in your reporting, to give you a few thoughts around, getting those reports across the line, as well as tell you a little bit about perhaps next reporting period or the reporting periods, coming up in the next few years. Sally mentioned that there's a lot happening, and I couldn't be more excited about this work. Just very briefly, CDSB is the Climate Disclosure Standards Board. We were set up just under 15 years ago, or just over 15 years ago actually, to help companies with bridging the gap between sustainability reporting and environment and financial reporting, bringing those two worlds together in the annual reports to help them to report high quality information to their investors. And we're a board member organization, and we have a wonderful technical work group of about, I think, over 60 members. Examples are at the bottom, who have driven our technical rigor for the past 15 years. As Sally mentioned, we've been very involved in the TCFD and supporting the market and implementing the TCFD recommendations. And as part of that, we have managed the TCFD Knowledge Hub, which I highly recommend you have a look at. A really great place to find those resources that you might need to implement the recommendations. We have excellent educational resources, e-learning courses. I just heard that we have about, last year we had about 8,000 course completions. So very, very popular and really helpful as a first point of contact. Whatever you need on the TCFD, it'll probably be on the hub. So very quickly, a few thoughts on the context that you are entering this year, and a few thoughts and suggestions around how to make sure you really get most out of your reporting. So just before we managed to go on holidays last year, the past few months, the UK government has been quite active across a range of policy dossiers, but most importantly, the Financial Conduct Authority has implemented some listing rules for a range of organizations, including premium listed companies and issuers of standard listed shares. And this came in as a requirement to disclose whether your disclosures are consistent with the TCFD, and if not, why not? And this is in place for accounting periods beginning on or after the 1st of January. There are similar but slightly different requirements for certain financial institutions. If you are one of those, let me know. I can also forward the relevant link. But really, this is one of the first proper TCFD implementation requirements in the UK context, and the Companies Act is to follow soon. Policy is moving quickly. The UK wants to be a leader and wants to push its market to be a leader in this space. So pressure is on, but many of you, I'm sure, have been preparing for this for some time. So now is the time to shine. One point I wanted to also make is, as you go through this process, hopefully you already have some buy-in from your leadership, but as you go through, you might, a few thoughts here in case you still need a bit more support internally to get the best out of your reporting. As you go through this, as you sort of get the team together, as you talk to your superiors, think about what might motivate them into getting interested and excited about TCFD implementation. Think about the investors that you have. On the TCFD website, you have a long list of TCFD supporters. If your investors are on there, of course, that will get the attention of management. Regulatory context I've presented to you, and the UK and other jurisdictions are moving faster and faster in this space. It's not a question of if this is coming, it's a question of when. In Europe, in the EU, we have also accelerated pace in this regard with the review of the Non-Financial Reporting Directive into the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive that will bring with it more specific and detailed reporting requirements and standards, also very much integrated in TCFD. And even, if you're listed on a US exchange, the Securities and Exchange Commission, a body of a regulator that's quite conservative in many respects, last year has published some notes on when it will ask issuers or listed companies on US exchanges to restate their disclosures if they haven't properly considered climate risk. So really everyone's moving fast, and so it's important that you have crossed your T's and dotted your I's. There's a lot more here, but in the interest of time, I'll move on. But really think about those drivers, those pressures that your business is facing, and also the incentives. TCFD reporting is about risk management, but it's also about attracting the right investor, long-term investor, that helps you finance your transition to a more sustainable, more resilient, and more profitable and growing company. Last point I want to actually mention before I move on is the importance of training of your board, of your management. This is, the competence, enabling your board and your management with the background, with the understanding, just to make them dangerous enough to ask the right questions is essential. And if that's not already in the plans, I highly recommend that you look at the skill set of your board in this respect: climate risk, sustainability risk, and whether there are opportunities to develop them further that will help them make better decisions, and of course understand the importance of these things and get you that buy-in in the longer term as well. So hopefully you already have the buy-in from your management, and you're already working through your disclosures. The next question you might have is, how do I know if I'm there? How do I know I've got it right? We've put together a little checklist for you, which I'm sure we can circulate these slides afterwards, based on the TCFD's principles and also the requirements and our own experience working with many businesses and looking at reviewing hundreds upon hundreds of reports that have worked on TCFD implementation. So on this list, you already see supported by leadership. That's relating to the previous slide. It's very important. It's important that it's presented. Material information is presented in your annual reports. That's your directors and strategic report in the UK. It's prepared according to the same rigor as financial information. It's specific, it's coherent, it's of course forward-looking, and a very important element to keep in mind. And one thing we always look at: is the front half supported by the back half? Do you have are your finances supporting your claims around taking this seriously? So one thing we often look at is R&D costs and investment in R&D going forward, related to some of the policies and measures that you might be taking. We can discuss this later in the session, so I just wanted to introduce these concepts. The other point I wanted to quickly breeze through, but just in the interest of time, it is a very important and exciting topic, is the next years and the years ahead. So as Sally said, things are moving quickly towards responding to the concerns of the market around the fragmented nature of the reporting, sustainability reporting space, and that's that frustration has also been shared by many of us within the standard setting community. And we also want to make sure that we move towards a unified and cohesive reporting system on sustainability that also is operating alongside financial reporting and connected to it. So as part of that work, we have been working with the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation, the IFRS Foundation, who sets financial reporting standards, and our fellow organizations to come together. And at the end of this month, actually, CDSB as an organization will sunset and form part of the International Sustainability Standards Board. This consolidation will be followed by the integration of the Value Reporting Foundation later on this year, which brings together the SASB standards and the integrated reporting framework and integrated thinking principles. So we're all coming together to set up a global, comprehensive baseline on sustainability reporting as it pertains to the enterprise value and the investor as a primary audience. We will focus on all of sustainability. We will start with climate, but move quickly on to other areas of sustainability, and we will take this approach with the consideration in mind that we want to make sure that these are implementable globally. So we'll create a global baseline which can be accepted and adopted into regulation globally, but obviously national and regional policies can be added onto that as in a building block fashion. Of course, this information must also be high quality and suitable for assurance. So this is a very exciting development, and I'm really hopeful, and I'm quite confident that this will be a welcome, the news that will be coming out this year will be really welcomed by all of you, simplifying the landscape, not having to try to navigate all of these different standards, but really sort of coming together in a cohesive way. To keep updated, I highly encourage you to sign up for alerts at the IFRS website, ifrs.org/sustainability, and of course, all of the standard setting will take place with the public and your views in mind. So we will be publishing consultations early in this year. So I highly recommend that you keep that in mind and respond as soon as they come out. This is a really good time for you to put in your views, share your views about how you think the future direction of sustainability reporting might develop. The last point I want to make is, of course, setting up and harmonizing all this work is going to take a little bit of time. We're moving as fast as we can, and we want to move as quickly as possible. In the meantime, don't stop what you're doing. Keep going. The TCFD, for example, is a foundation of this work. The structure of the TCFD and the content of the TCFD forms a core of our thinking. And so by continuing applying existing frameworks, so that's the TCFD recommendations, the CDSB framework, ISSB standards, integrated reporting framework, these will all prepare you to what's coming out of the ISSB. So we're very excited about these developments. Apologies for rattling through all of this, but I wanted to make sure there's enough time, of course, for the other speaker and also for a discussion. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Super. Mike, thank you. That was a really good overview. I'm happy to take some questions from Michael. If anybody has some questions, I had a question myself, or just I'd love you to reinforce, because I think that last point is really important. Just could you elaborate a little bit more on the approach that the ISSB will take in terms of the building blocks approach? Because I think we've been inundated with lots of different standards and frameworks over the last 5-10 years, and I think it's been a bit overwhelming for corporate. So I'd like if you could just elaborate a little bit more and give them the confidence that you're not going to be creating new things, but hopefully building on existing frameworks and standards. That would be great.
Sure, absolutely. So the work that's been done to date, and we've published some prototypes, not as the IFRS Foundation, but as the standard setters that are merging into this organization, as well as the TCFD and some other organizations, to give you an idea of what this might look like. And you can actually download that from the IFRS Foundation's website now. But what we want to make sure is that we move at pace, and we believe, of course, that a lot of great work has already been done. So the approach that we've taken is just taking the best bits of everything. We have all sort of focused on different areas and tried to fill gaps, but it didn't quite fit in. It was quite difficult to fit them all together. What we're doing at the moment is looking at the existing work, the TCFD recommendations, the CDSB framework, the ISSB standards, integrated reporting framework, et cetera, and just bringing them together into a cohesive package, taking the best bits out of each, not just sort of mindlessly putting them together, but in a considered way. So if you look at the existing sort of prototypes that were published, just to kind of give you an idea of the direction of travel, you will see it's really true to what is happening. It's just bringing them together, removing that duplication, and making it a cohesive package, so that you don't have to, go and look at different things.
And one of the key work streams I know that you're focused on is really trying to come to a common language across all the different standards and frameworks, because often in the past that's been the challenge with SASB's 5 areas and IIRC's 6 capitals and different words meaning different things or even the same things in some cases. So I think that will be very welcomed to the market overall. And now the other thing I just wanted to ask very quickly is, you talked a little bit about timing and you referred to what was happening in Europe. And I think it would be great if you could just address that a little bit more specifically in terms of the different approach that's coming out of Europe versus the ISSB, and what your advice would be to corporates around that. Because although most of the companies on the call will be UK listed, they obviously have global investors out there, and they might be dual listed as well. So just if you could address Europe and all of this and how you're working with them.
Sure. So it's important to note that the European developments are still, European developments on reporting are still in draft form, but they're moving quickly. But they're of course taking a approach to materiality that's called double materiality. So looking at both the sort of enterprise value issue. So what does it mean? What do these things mean to my business? But also looking at the impact side of things. What is the impact of my business on sustainability matters? And that's of course called the double materiality perspective. The important element to recognize, and that's almost a paraphrasing from the chair of the project task force that working on setting up these European standards, you can't have double materiality without financial materiality. And this goes back to that building blocks approach. A lot of the work that we're doing is focusing on that enterprise value, financial materiality focus, which can also be helpful to the European standards of development. I like to think about them as little Venn diagrams that are overlapping and coming together. And that's really a good way of thinking about it. We're very closely working together. There's ongoing discussions, of course. I can't comment on those too specifically. It's work in progress, but we've really had encouraging and constructive discussions, especially recently with our friends in Europe, and really looking forward to it. The other point, very quickly, just to add, is the investor side of things. And Europe and many other jurisdictions are looking at implementing various taxonomies of activities for the investment sector and sort of as for their investments. And that's perhaps a very key driver, even though you're not listed in or have under sort of European jurisdictions. Investors in Europe, but also in other jurisdictions, will be looking to understand, their investments and whether they fit within that sort of sustainable green category, and they'll be asking a lot more questions. So this whole idea of taxonomies, if you're like me, you have to read through the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of regulatory technical standards. It's quite challenging. But it's good to keep an eye on these developments. I know that in the UK base is also looking at these things. You might be getting more questions on this, so be prepared to really look down in your operations and understand what you need to give these investors, even if you're not European.
Thanks, Michael. That's really helpful. And just so all of you on the call know, we're planning on holding sessions on double materiality as well as upcoming taxonomies in a similar type format, where we get you together to sort of share experiences and challenges, so we can move forward together on that. So look out for those moving forward. Okay, Michael, that was a really great overview. And what I thought we would do right now, and we're happy to take questions, and I think Michael's going to be around with us for the whole session, and I'm sure we'll take questions afterwards if there was any technical questions that come out of the discussions. But I'm gonna pass over to James right now. As I mentioned, James just joined the group just a few short days ago, which is great. James most recently has worked at EasyJet. I'll pass over to him to let him give a proper introduction for himself. But what I'm really excited about is the practical experience that James brings to the team at Black Sun, and I particularly thought it was relevant, his experience in TCFD this year. And as many of you probably know, EasyJet is his September year end, so I think just put his report to bed before he joined us before Christmas. So James, I'll hand over to you to give us a little overview of your experience and take any questions from the group.
Thank you very much, Sally. And Naomi or Mirko, would you mind sharing my slides? Is that okay? And just while they're being loaded, I will just provide a couple of additional remarks. as Sally said, I just literally joined Black Sun, a sustainability director at the beginning of the year. And as a September year-end reporting company, I was fortunate to be able to complete that piece of work before joining at the end of last year. And it's something that I've done for 2 years now at EasyJet, 2 TCFD disclosures. And I guess the point of my short introduction to this is about trying to talk at it from a practitioner point of view, because I've obviously now come on the sort of advisory side, but you know, I've been a practitioner for a long time. I've worked in sustainability for more than 20 years. 15 years of that have been in-house. I guess, Naomi, you might have a problem sharing. Would you be able to enable me to share my screen from this end? And I'll happily share my presentation from this side if you could enable.
Yeah, I can do that, James. No problem.
Thank you. Thanks, Mirko. Yeah, so just while that's loading, okay, thank you. I'm going to just share that now. So if you give me the thumbs up when that.
Yeah, all good.
Well, okay, we are sharing. Okay, so can everybody see that? Can you see that?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah,
so we
okay.
Can see you.
Yeah, okay.
If you, yeah, there you go. Perfect.
There we go. Okay, full screen. So you've got full screen now. So just by way of introduction, I'm not going to go over this in any detail at all. Michael's given a great overview of the standard, of the background. The only thing I would focus on and just draw your attention to is that little box on the right-hand side of the screen. So here in the advisory team that Sally leads, we do a lot of research. We keep tabs on a lot of good practice, follow the trends that are going out there in the marketplace so we can provide the best possible advice to our clients. And I just wanted to zoom in on those 3 sort of magenta colored bullet points on the bottom there, that from our most recent research that obviously when we share this content with you, we'll provide the hyperlink and you can read the report in more detail. But there's some quite interesting statistics that you're seeing there, whereby nearly all of the FTSE 100 reference TCFD to a greater or lesser extent in their annual report, as Michael was sort of telling us about. More than half, so 61%, have dedicated TCFD sections. So they've often got that very much front and center in the strategic report. And then around 1/5 or 21% have got a standalone TCFD report, which is, that is increasing, I think, all the time, as there is increasing call and request for detailed outline of what the business is doing in the short, medium, and the longer term, to borrow some of the sort of the clauses from the TCFD guidance with regards to climate impact, climate risk, and ultimately climate resilience. So I'm going to give some insights into sort of the EasyJet journey around TCFD disclosure, but also I thought it would be useful to just give a brief timeline, a brief overview of the work that EasyJet has done in recent times. So it's worth highlighting. So if I go pillar by pillar on that left-hand side, so before financial year 20, myself and other members of the sustainability team, we joined in March 2020. And we were the first people to be within the business as dedicated subject matter experts, experienced sustainability practitioners to have joined the business. And so really there was no dedicated in-house team before. Sort of subject matter expertise was not really there. It was a little bit thinner on the ground. So, and if you go down to the bottom of that pillar, that I guess manifests itself in the fact that the greenhouse gas data that was disclosed was fairly sort of top line. Being in the aviation industry, they've been publishing an efficiency metric or an intensity metric for many years. So that's, that wasn't changed. But in terms of the totals that were given for the full carbon footprint, that was really very top line. They had participated in the CDP climate change survey for a few years, but either for one reason or another, which I'm not quite familiar with, they weren't necessarily putting those scores into the public domain, or there are some years they didn't have the capacity to actually respond properly to CDP. So if we then go to the middle pillar, so March 2020, so halfway through the financial year 20, dedicated team was established, and that obviously was able to really accelerate the progress with regards to the quality, the breadth and depth of carbon-related and greenhouse gas disclosure. So for the first time of publishing the annual report in sort of the tail end of 2020, there was an SECR compliant table and disclosure of greenhouse gas information. CDP was done sort of perhaps properly for the first time. So I was the lead author and project manager on the CDP disclosure within the climate change pillar of their disclosure platform. And that was the best grade that they'd achieved to date. So that was a C grade within the CDP scoring framework. But at the time, the business was still, I guess, a little anxious about whether they wanted to put this information in the public domain. There were still quite a few senior people that need to be brought on board. So the business made the decision that it wasn't 100% at the right stage of its reporting and disclosure journey to want to put the CDP response into the public domain in 2020. And then TCFD, so that was the first time, literally a one-pager was done. And that sort of bookended the sustainability chapter within the strategic report, sort of nestled just in front of the non-financial information statement. So then fast forward to the financial year, as Sally mentioned, I've just sort of departed EasyJet to join Black Sun. And as a September year end, obviously very busy time of year in the fourth quarter of calendar year 2021, much as it is now for December year ends. So really appreciate you making the time to join us today. We were able to really drill down and sort of leverage the expertise within the business, within the team, and also for the connectivity that had been made. I think it was Michael that just very momentarily ago mentioned about IIRC, and the whole sort of piece around IIRC is about integrated thinking as well as integrated reporting. And because the team then had been in post for sort of approaching 15 months before CDP was submitted in the summer of 2021, there was a lot greater opportunity to really cement some of those foundations with regards to sustainability governance, really establish the sustainability committee with board level ownership and chairmanship in the form of that board director. And then I guess because the CDP was a really solid foundation for TCFD, which I'll go on to talk about in a moment, we were able to expand the quality and the breadth of that reporting. And so that went from 1 page to 4 pages. The other key thing that EasyJet did towards the end of the year, obviously COP seems a little while ago now, but literally only 2 months ago, was make that commitment to the race to zero, and also make a commitment to set a science-based target or a target in line with science-based thinking with regards to a net zero pathway. So you can see that the speed of the activity and how it's fast forwarded during that time. So if I go on to just to give you a snapshot of where EasyJet's thinking was when it was putting together its TCFD disclosure. So this is just a screenshot of that first year. So that's financial year 20 report. It's quite top line, as you can see from it's a single page. Rightly or wrongly, we sort of arranged it around 5 pillars, even though obviously TCFD is arranged really around 4. We wanted to sort of draw out the fact that scenario analysis was something that we were going to do, and I think the overall sentiment and tone was set at that point was about, this is what we're going to be doing, this is what we plan to do, this is how we plan to really focus on this in the year ahead. It's worth stating that we hadn't sought external subject matter expertise at the time, so I had the task of putting this together fairly quickly with the information that we had available to us at the time. And then fast forward 12 months, and there was quite dramatic improvements in the breadth and depth of that disclosure. So we're now looking at a 4-page disclosure, and I'll show you a screenshot of the other spread on the following slide. But I think one thing I found particularly useful, because there's quite a lot of overlap in terms of some of the thematic areas between CDP and TCFD. And so if you've got a solid CDP response, and particularly if it's in the public domain, and I'll come on to talk about that, then that is a really good starting point in terms of helping you to populate the necessary disclosure within the format that you see. The other thing that EasyJet did and talked about or talks about in its annual report published at the end of last year is the scenario analysis and the detailed work that it did with the Cambridge Centre for Risk Studies. So this is part of the Judge Institute, the sort of management school at Cambridge University, and they've created a sort of a hub of climate resilience and reporting expertise there, and particularly using the modelling that they do, value at risk sort of approaches with regards to climate risk. So that was quite transformational in terms of the quality of the disclosure that we could put in there. And the other thing that they helped us with is the financial quantification of both risks and opportunities, and between both physical risks and also transition risks. So, I mean, in terms of navigation, we'd like to think obviously reporting is about the quality of the content and the narrative that you can create, but also you need to be able to communicate it in an effective way. You need to be able to make it engaging, and you need to make it easy for people to work their way through and extract the required information. So the decision was made within the business to use the 11 clauses that are spread across the 4 pillars, and that's what you'll notice there. And just to really try and make it almost as simple as possible for people to come away going, okay, I've got a clear idea about, if you look on that slide now, about risk management, about how the organization's processes for identifying climate-related risks and opportunities are laid out. So that was sort of our approach. And using, the partnership that we had with Black Sun as our, reporting partner, or as EasyJet's reporting partner, to help us try and sort of lift or elevate that story on the page. We did also make use of the subject matter expertise within Black Sun, and to sort of circle back to Michael's point about front end and the back half of the report having to have a conversation, particularly when you start talking about numbers, and I'll go on to talk about that. So if I was to give you some of my learnings and my takeaways from my experience of working on sort of being the key author on TCFD disclosure at EasyJet for 2 consecutive years, then, and forgive me if some of these sound very obvious, but I guess when we go into our breakout rooms, we'll get a better appreciation in terms of where you are on your journey. So really key to identify who is going to take the overall responsibility for holding the pen and creating that narrative for the TCFD section or statement, whether it be contained within the annual report or as a separate disclosure, but also really to identify the responsibilities, the roles, and the timelines, because this is important content, as Michael was referring to and as Sally's referred to. Investors, either existing investors or prospective investors, and other sort of asset managers, owners, will be looking at this information to provide an insight into the long-term viability, the ability for the business to be in business for the long term and to create value over the long term. So really, it is important to build in sufficient time, particularly you need to understand what the sign-off process is going to be internally. Is it going to go to if you have a dedicated corporate responsibility committee, does it need to go through that first of all? Will it need to go to an audit committee, for example, or a risk committee? Will you actually need board member sign-off? So really important to understand those from the get-go, and then to work backwards, and then to obviously work closely with whoever is project managing your report within your organization to work out, have you been gifted or given sufficient allocation within the pagination plan to perhaps mirror your aspirations and the work that you've done in the last year. So with regards to the reporting and statements, obviously I'd already alluded to this about requiring integrated thinking and collaboration. And that was the one thing I did really enjoy about being a sustainability team professional for many years, is about the opportunity to actually engage with all of these different stakeholder groups. And it's likely that finance, IR, risk, etc., those other parties of which a number of you who've joined us today are from those different teams, they've probably all got a seat at the table and understandably a voice that would need to provide some input or sign off, or just ideas to bounce around. Because if you're approaching TCFD for the first time, it can be quite a challenging task. As I mentioned before, CDP was really useful in 2021 because of the additional detail that we put in there and the effort that we put in, because the business had just gone on a journey in the 12 months leading up to the CDP submission in the summer 2021. There is a rich source of input, but I guess the other thing is, if your submission is out there in the public domain, then a lot of that content, the narrative, thematic areas, all those difficult conversations that you may have had to have with risk and finance or IR, comms, PR, legal, depending on which part of the business you're in. If that content's out there, you've had those challenging conversations perhaps, and you've navigated those, and you've got that signed off content, then that can be really beneficial to help sort of expedite the process of getting your content down into TCFD, knowing that a lot of it's already been seen by eyes outside of the organization as well as key people inside, and that could just really help speed you along. And again, to circle back to Michael's point about sort of the front half of the report talking to the back half, this was something that came up in conversation quite late in the process of the annual report cycle when I was at EasyJet last autumn, because there were, for the first time, we put financial quantification of key risks and opportunities around transition and physical risks in our CDP. Now, that was published in the summer of 2021. The report wasn't published until late November, early December. Quite a lot can happen in 3 months. All of the noise around COP talks were going on. Obviously, the business then was very keen to put something out there about net zero. So it's just worth bearing in mind that depending on when your financial year is, and depending on what that lag is between you publishing perhaps CDP, having done all the hard yards and discussions around getting those financial quantification numbers in there signed off, there may be a need that you might have to revisit those numbers. The audit partner, PwC of EasyJet, was very keen to understand, well, what were the costs that we'd use for our assumptions when it came to the financial sort of valuations and the potential climate risk impact? You know, how much had we said that we were going to price into our modeling for emission credit permits, or working in the aviation industry, what did we think the price of sustainable aviation fuel was going to be? What did we think the cost from severe disruption from weather was going to be? You know, what they wanted to understand the route and the background to those calculations, because they wanted to make sure when it came to the back half of the report around a viability statement about impairment costs, that there was some, you know, harmonious, joined up, holistic narrative. And then finally, it might be worth, depending where you are on the journey, depending on how resource constrained you might be or time constrained, it might be worth considering getting some subject matter expertise, getting some other eyes across your draft disclosure as you prepare that for your annual report. And particularly if you're preparing a standalone TCFD report or statement, like, as you saw my earlier statistic, a number are, then that might require further scrutiny, and to give you the comfort that you can go to the audit committee, the risk committee, to the board member who might need to sign it off. Say, well, actually, it's not just, I've worked in a small team of people in these 3 departments. It's had some external sort of, challenge. Somebody's looked at it as a critical friend. So I think that is all I wanted to cover. I've got an appendix slide. You'll see that afterwards. It's just some other additional information, sort of sources and materials. So I'm going to hand back to Sally.
That's great. Thank you, James, for that overview. That was really, really helpful. And I hope it gave everybody on the call a good idea of how somebody's gone through the process. I wondered what we're going to do now is we're going to split into 2 different discussion groups, so you can have a chance to discuss some of these issues that have come up in the earlier sessions with your peers and share any of your challenges and experiences. Before I do that, if anybody has any questions for James specifically, and then if we can look out in the chat box, we should be providing 2 different links for everybody on the call. Just in the meantime, I guess, James, while we get these links into the chat box, and while we get the split of the groups into the chat box, just a quick question for me, just in terms of, biggest learning in terms of having gone through the process, being involved for 2 years, what's your sort of top, very biggest learning from all of that in terms of what you would do differently moving forward?
Well, I mean, I know it sounds, and probably stating the obvious, so that to one point, and it's an obvious point, and as a parent of people who are now starting to get homework from school, don't leave it to the last minute, start early, don't necessarily use the annual reporting cycle. So as a September year end, so I've got in my mind all of the key dates and times. The annual report often, we like to start thinking about it in July, or we previously started to think about in July, but really don't leave those detailed conversations, particularly if you're starting building in scenario analysis, or if you start wanting to communicate the financial quantification of your risks and opportunities, having those challenging conversations with the financial controller, the CFO, your IR team. You've got to take people on the journey. Now, it'd be interesting to get any initial feedback from people on the call, is who is the key person holding the pen on the creation of the TCFD. So it kind of fell to the sustainability team because it sat in the sustainability chapter of the strategic report. So I guess the key learning is understand early doors who is going to be responsible for it, the production, and then that kind of creates everything from there. And there's no reason why you couldn't be starting to flesh all this out 6 months before the end of the year, but inevitably there's always something else to do, and nothing creates the momentum like a deadline.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, James, for that. And I think that's a reoccurring message across all of this, all of these things. I think reporting has moved from sort of, it's a continuous activity. We need to put these things in place. It's the process that we need to put in place and get really be thinking about this all year round, just rather than just at reporting season. So I think that's really good advice. Now we're going to pick up that in more detail in the discussion groups. As I said, we've broken you into 2 groups. Actually, they've done it by actually individual name, but it just so you know, we've split basically in terms of companies. We've got about 12 companies represented today. So to join Zoom meeting 1, I'm asking for all the individuals from Antofagasta, Babcock, Contour, Global, DLG, and INTS Group. And all the individuals are named there. And then to join Zoom meeting 2, that link, we've got the remainder of you, which is IAG, Pearson, Reach, Royal London, Tesco, and Vodafone. So you'll see your names there. So if everybody could join those groups, we'll then be able to be on video and have a discussion. You can introduce yourselves and we can share more intimately some of the challenges and opportunities moving forward. So I'm hoping that we don't lose anybody in all of this. And if we do, please refer to your email, and I'm sure Naomi will follow up with a link there if we somehow lose you in virtual space. So looking forward to that. Unfortunately, we will not come back together at the end, but what I will be moderating one group and James will be moderating the other group. And what we will do, as I said in the chat box, is we will summarize all the discussions and share with you an overview of all the learnings and opportunities from that. Chatham House rules will apply. And as I said, so you can get the insights from across all of these different organizations. So let's just fingers crossed that this works. So I'm going to move forward. James is going to do the Zoom meeting link 1 and his team, and I will do Zoom meeting link 2 with my team. So we'll see you in the links. Okay. Thanks so much. And thanks so much for joining, everybody. As I said, we'll be doing a lot more events moving forward. If there are any great suggestions, please let us know. We're here to help you and help make your lives easier and also bring you together to learn from others. So I'm looking forward to catching up individually soon. Okay. Bye-bye.